Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. Tonight, we'll be looking at a topic I'm particularly fascinated with, critical thinking for HR professionals. I read one book way back. It was written by Bill Gates. The title of the book, I think, is Doing Business at the Speed of Thought, doing business at the speed of light, something like that. And one of the things I read in that book that has stayed with me even 15 years after I read that book is that the purpose of education, irrespective of the course of study, is to increase our capacity to think, increase our capacity of the whole nation, irrespective of whether in private, public, faith-based, governmental, so on and so forth. And that line item in the JD should be hired or employed to think and critical thinking for our profession. My name is Day Oshun. Just showing very briefly is a list of my profile, my bio. Sometimes some people say only any. Just say a little about you, but I will have a YouTube session. I put it to you that by the time you type only, most likely to bring Adeosun up. If you're not following the YouTube channel, please follow the notification so that you can get alert or updated anytime we upload any session. The session will be from tonight. I have worked in about 13 organizations in 13 industries, which gives me, which has given me opportunities to learn from different contexts, work with different kind of business owners, one-man, PLC, multinational, indigenous, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, minority tribe, and so on and so forth. I've seen it and done quite a bit. Ladies and gentlemen, I've also put in academia, many which are in the HR domain, all to the group of have been bestowed of this session. You should be able to apply thinking to analyze situations and solve problems effectively. You must be able to make thoughtful, well-reasoned decisions based on evidence and logic. You must be able to identify potential risk, biases, and assumptions in various situations. You must be able to communicate ideas and viewpoints more clearly and confidently. And then you must be able to approach challenges with a balanced, open, and adaptable mindset. Now, if you are familiar with theater, plays, and so forth, this phrase "act one, scene one," you'll be able to rest with. All right. Picture a senior analyst reviewing a report, right? And the data seems very solid, but something feels off. Emphasis on feels off. Instead of approving it immediately, they pause, question checking sources, split second decision to think, right? Some techniques, which is examples today, will show us how to harness that same skill. It will surprise you or delight you or shock you to note that over 60% of professionals we are talking about the last major decision. That's scary. Again, we'll fix that today by building habits to think. Not to see what it is that we do a lot of things on autopilot. Autopilot. Sometimes you just wake up, brush your teeth. We don't think, why am I brushing my teeth? Why should I brush my teeth? If you reflect and ponder on why you brush your teeth, then the next question is, should you brush it once, twice, or 3 times, or after every meal? Now, of course, you don't need to answer, but I'm just saying people, humans, are creatures of habits because autopilot makes things very comfortable. But especially with critical major decisions, more basic up in the morning and just any color, any color. If you will ask, okay, which season, what's happening? You think about all those parameters and then the color and so ladies and gentlemen, that you make about 35,000 decisions. But how many of these affect your fare? How many of these affect your clients or work organizations? And we have clients, we have customers, we have stakeholders, we have regulators, we have people that the output of our work as a client or as a firm, impact on. We need to be able to reason and explore the thing. Now, look at our 1990s. NASA is already responsible for the space mission, going to the moon, going to other experience so we can and make, better this and learn even more 100 million data. Because one use metric units and another use. So metric unit is a measurement is a metric measurement type in two teams in the organization use two different measurements and it led to a loss. No one identified or questioned the mismatch, and it led to what? A costly lesson in assumption. So it's almost like saying somebody is using kilometers and then somebody is using miles. There's no problem, but there'll be a problem if both teams are not using either miles or kilometers, or one of the teams converts to the other. At organizations, small oversights can have what? Big consequences. You need to ponder on that. Small oversights can have big consequences. Sometimes these oversights are a result of what? Operating on autopilot, not thinking. Okay, again, we'll discuss how thinking saves money potential. All right. Now, critical isn't just a nice tool. It is also one of our unchecked all this together. What is critical? This is the discipline process of actively analyzing, okay, evaluate and synthesize information to real reason comes. It involves questioning assume value. Now, I know consultants on this call, and I know there are consultants of apologies for the network issue here from my hand. All right. So before I was thrown off, okay. Just a minute. Let me see if I can change the network. If you have any for me, please type. Both perspectives. Now, if you have ever been as an employee, or they have from questioning is very critical to thinking, and it doesn't matter who does the questioning. In other words, you can be asking yourself questions, and that way to improve, enhance your quality of thought. Or a colleague, a peer can ask you questions. Now, depending on where we work today and the caliber of people we work with, you will realize that if you are junior and then you are trying to think and you're trying to ask questions, maybe from your superiors, depending on the organizational culture, and then depending on the personal prejudice, bias, or orientation of your line manager, of your senior colleagues, of your management team, they could almost take your questioning as if you are challenging authority, or in some cases, almost like you are rude, no matter how polite you are with the way you are asking the questions. All right. But questioning is very key. And even if you question yourself more, you will get more value, better. Now let's quickly look at some direct HR. Let's look at the topic relative to HR, and then we'll look at the topic in general without necessarily using HR example. Now, when you talk about workforce planning, okay, so I will be showing some scenarios where we may not necessarily be thinking critically, where we are almost on what? Autopilot. So one of the things you may realize is when you are doing workforce planning, you will just be using historical data. In other words, the things that have happened in the past, and taking cognizance future skill needs. For example, AI, digital trend, and so on and so forth. Of course, this will have consequences on business and your organization's ability to scale. Again, that acquisition is an example. The important thing to do, you try to hire for cultural. If you are not careful to prioritize cultural fit, okay, or may rely too much on referrals. And why do you like or want referrals? It's comfortable. Within the people making these referrals, know them, they to really bring people that are like us or that can fit into our organization. What are possible consequences of this? You may now begin to have almost focus, and then you may also begin to have skill mismatch. When you're not what problems or challenges associated with this is, there's something we call group think. Almost everybody's thinking are like no dissent, no dissenting voice, no alternative paradigms. And yes, it may look good because maybe we won't be arguing, we'll quickly be reaching consensus and agreements, but what happens is that we will not be thinking critically. And thinking critically helps add value to processes, add value to results, help us optimize resources. Take learning and development. If you are not thinking critically, it's very easy just to keep on rolling out generic training without skills gap analysis. By the time you are doing your gap analysis, that is what thinking, critical thinking that you are deploying. If you don't think critically in L&D, you will get low return on investment on your training. You will not necessarily see behavioral changes, which will ensure, and you need these behavioral changes to be able to translate into tangible business results. Let's look at succession planning very quickly. Okay, most organizations, if by default, by autopilot, you'll be promoting based on tenure. When you have spent 3 years, is loyal to the organization, and if you are not careful, you will not promote necessarily on what based on potentials, the potential of the employee. You won't promote based on readiness. Is the person truly really ready for the next level? Have they been adequately prepared and primed for that? Some of the consequences can arise, emanate could include leadership crisis. Won't have a stable, rigorous pipeline for key roles. Of course, in theory or paper, it will look like you have people. But when those vacancies crystallizes and you promote them or move people to those, in the space of 3 months, 6 months, you will realize you have made a mistake because they will not be able to pull their weights, and business is all online, right? And when we talk about competition, you want to copy a benchmark of thinking. It's a good thing to do. You do it, but it's not enough to copy benchmarks. It's not enough to what are the competition doing. Also not to what is internal equity. Okay, so the companies paying strategic HR if you don't think critically. Okay, because you will have a misaligned HR strategy. Your business will fail to adapt to what market changes and realities. Again, let's look at some other operational HR value chain and a lack of critical thinking. If you take onboarding as an example, what you will do without critical thinking is that you will just be treating it as paperwork. You will not carefully and thoughtfully watch out for cultural integration. Consequences that can play out could include your new hires will quit early and you'll have slow productivity. Some organizations, when they measure turnover, they just don't measure the general turnover. Yes, you should measure the total or general turnover. They also measure turnover for talents. When we say talent now, the high valued employees, then they also measure turnover for first year employees. In other words, new employees. They want to see when people join us, maybe in the first 6 months to 1 year, what's the retention rate? Because chance of people thinking they don't fit or the values of the organization doesn't align may be very high, especially in the first year of joining. Take performance management, which is a very fundamental part of the HR value chain. Again, if you are not thinking critically, we'll just be using rigid KPIs. We won't have adequate feedback loops. We won't have robust coaching. And some of the outcomes will include demotivation, bias ratings, and so on and so forth. Take employee engagement as another example. Again, autopilot, we survey employees. But when we survey the employees, when we administer pulse survey, end of the year survey, mid-year survey, quarterly survey, what happens? What happens? Do we act on the feedback, or We just collate the reports and then we file it, electronic filing, or we just send it to the management. It requires critical thinking to even evaluate the insights we glean from the data. It also requires critical thinking to engage with the stakeholders, the management and the board, and to be able to get them to see how the feedback can be worked upon, accepted, implemented, and how we can make certain adjustments, amendments to either workplace policy, comp and ben, career management, and so on and so forth. And then we'll get greater value for the organization. Now, if you have worked in the same organization for a long while and you have been administering employee engagement, one of the things you will have noticed is that the participation rates of employees in filling these surveys will drop. 2 or 3 ways you will notice. Normally, if you give them 2 weeks to fill the survey, you will need to do a lot of engagement, mobilization to get them to fill. If you are not careful, you almost now begin to use subtle threats to say, oh, you have to fill it, please fill it, or you'll be using emotional blackmail. The reason is all the ones they've been filling before. What is the outcome? The other thing is that people will not even bother to fill, or they will fill, but you will notice that they are filling mechanically. What do I mean? Maybe you just see very good for everything. You will see that they are not reflecting specifically question by question. So they just speak good. And it will be, by the time you analyze it, you won't be able to make any meaningful output, no meaningful insight out of it. Okay, trust erosion, and then you begin to get quite quitted. With respect to HR analytics, okay, autopilot will collect data, but do we really analyze the trends? Okay, what are the turnover causes, for example, exit interview? I've worked in places where we interview people when they are going. You get recommendation, and then of course, it requires critical thinking to be able to engage management, and not an engagement. It's not just to say people are leaving, and so what? And when I say and so what, I mean impacts on the business, positive and negative. How is it affecting our efficiency? How is it affecting our effectiveness? How is it impacting on our financial revenues, on our ability to satisfy customers? Because if you can think critically, we'll be able to crack the code. And at some point, we'll be able to make compelling arguments that even for the one business, they will realize that something has to give. You don't want a situation we'll not be having reactive fixes, we are having reoccurring problems. And that will mean we are not really making progress. Let's take a look at compliance and risk. Okay. Again, if we don't think critically with respect to our employee and workforce, to the various in what we will always update policies actively after maybe a lawsuit has happened, after it has taken place, after harassment has taken place. Your document requires, for example, maybe once a year, you take the time and we will do it. So because with an handbook here, just all the paragraphs, all the sections are still relevant today and will be relevant tomorrow. We need to apply to this. The consequence of not having an up-to-date handbook, policy framework, and the likes to find equally to once again, I apologize for this epileptic network. I'm trying to move to a third network now. if this doesn't work this time around. So let's move on. All right. Hope you are following. Please just put a message in the chat box to show that you are following. So not thinking critically, working and operating on autopilot can lead to strategic failures that halt business growth. For example, hiring the wrong skills for future needs. Operational failures halt efficiency and culture. Okay. Some of the solutions, we'll look at it in more detail, but upfront here, we need to keep asking why. Why? Why do we use these specific KPIs? Why do we use these specific indicators? Why not this? Okay, we need to test assumptions. Okay, we need to use data and we need to confirm and validate the data. The last set of, so to speak, HR examples I want to use, and I'm intentionally using all these HR examples back to back so that when we move back to critical thinking generically, at least we have HR at the back of our mind. We have used it to lay a foundation. So looking at HR leadership and critical thinking, all right? So decision making, at some point you have to make decisions, okay? If you are operating from a lack of critical thinking, what will happen? We'll be relying more on what? Intuition, tradition over data. Like a gut feeling. You say, something's told me, I just felt. Now, don't get me wrong. Those kind of hunch and intuition are valid. The intuition should lead you to even go the extra critical thinking. And even when you're using critical thinking techniques, your own intuition come to play and may have a role to play in the process of interpretation, in the process of maybe dig further. So for example, maybe you are doing 5 whys. The aunt may say, ask 2 or 3 more questions. Okay, so it becomes part of your safeguard to like your guardian angel. Again, we're not trying to rubbish hunch or intuition at all, but we are saying we must not take away critical thinking. Critical thinking does not mean you don't have faith. Faith, F-A-I-T-H. In fact, faith may be the reason why you are even thinking more critically. Okay. Science, critical thinking is scientific, is sustainable, is empirical, and it can help you sustain great results. Some of the consequences of lack of critical thinking in decision making, policies misalign with employee needs, and there can be a backlash. So we want to use evidence-based HR. We want to tie decisions to what? Metrics. Turnover versus pay benchmarks, for example. Another HR leadership thing we do is resource allocation. Okay, do you want to just fund trendy initiatives? Okay, maybe you hear that virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence is the in thing now. But yeah, it sounds nice. A lot of organizations are using it. Individuals are even using it on a personal level. But critical thinking will say before you propose it to management, you quickly do a return on investment, even if it is an hypothesized version, like a forecast, all right? So that you don't want to waste your budget. You don't want to have a situation where you have invested in training and there is no measurable impact. Again, part of critical thinking will now be, can we do a pilot? So that when we do the pilot, we can run it for maybe 1 branch, 1 location, or 10 employees. That way, we can now have something to guide us as to the likely return on investment. So that, God forbid, if it is going to be a waste, it will be a controlled or a minimal waste. Change management. We want to implement transformation, but you don't really get your stakeholder input, or you don't plan the phases very well. Again, it shows a lack of critical thinking. Now, one of the things I'm trying to show us as we're having this session is to also show all of us how, in multiple ways, we have been using critical thinking. Okay, so it's not as if we are not thinking before, we will now be thinking now. No, we've been thinking before, but we will now be more intentional and more deliberate and more consistent. with our approach to critical thinking and applying it to our day-to-day HR job. Again, when you don't think critically through a change management process, what will happen is you will face resistance. There will be low adoption. There will be failure. So one of the things that helps us to think in HR are frameworks. Okay, they are models. Okay, and look at it. Today we have some popular models. You say the business partnering model, maybe employee advocate, change management, for example, business partner, and so on and so forth. So imagine you are doing the HR plan for the rest of the year. When you think you take performance and use their framework called scorecard, where you have another perspective, a customer perspective, process, and people. It forces you to think across 4 dimensions. If you holistically use those 4 dimensions, team is what is better. But imagine you don't have any framework and you are just coming up with a performance appraiser for your organization. You will just be on autopilot. It is what comes to your mind. A lot of it is good, but you have to be comprehensive. All right. You apply to help you analyze and communicate strategy. Okay. When you are trying to hire in some organization, you will see that sometimes HR defers to the head of department of the hiring department, but when you are working with some head of departments, they'll be telling you that, for this role, the person must have 10 years experience. Let us think again. Why 10 years? Why not 7? Why not 5? Why not 8? We are saying what is magical about 10? What is it that you need 10 years to be able to accumulate and to be able to say that you are proficient? So if you can break down what adds up to that 10 years, and you may not be able to say, okay, 10 years if you have worked in, I'm just saying this hypothetical, 10 years if you have worked in one business, 5 years if you have worked in multinational. Why? You may realize that in a multinational, there are certain exposures. It doesn't take you 10 years to get it. Meanwhile, maybe in an indigenous organization or a one-man business, it may take you less or longer, depending on the scenario. So we are saying, don't just take 10 years and take it hook, line, and sinker. Question it. Ask why, so that you can know of a truth if that 10 years is cast in stone, or there can be other alternative parameters that can be a substitute to the 10 years. Let me give this example. If we follow, especially job vacancies in the past abroad, I mean abroad now, not necessarily Nigeria, one thing you will notice way back is that you will see something like BSc or first degree with 2 years experience. Then you can now see something like secondary school with 6 years experience for the same role. I'll say that again. Maybe BSc, 2 years experience. Secondary school, 6 years experience. So they are using education as an alternative to experience. You can see that. So they are not closing the door that compulsorily you must have a degree. They are saying if you have experience on the field and you have schools, it's just that maybe you need more years of experience if you don't have a degree and less years of experience if you have a degree. So it's thinking that has led to that. Some organizations today don't even, in quote, care whether you have a degree or not. What they care is, do you have competencies? And how do they measure or determine the competencies? They may administer their own type of competency assessment. Can be computer-based, can be paper-based, such that if you can pass those tests, they know you have the requirement to get the job done. It's not the degree that you get or did not get that gives you enablement to do the work. Again, we are even questioning the degree. We are questioning the certifications. Okay, so it's very important. You don't want institutions where your roles stay vacant just because you have unrealistic expectations. To make matters worse, some of us don't even want to really pay for what we're asking for. I don't want innovation to stop. All right, so we want to ensure you facilitate job audits to benchmark roles versus market realities. All right, with respect to culture and ethics, you may want to pay attention to toxic behaviors. Okay, you don't want a situation where you have a high-performing bully manager and you ignore it, because lack of critical thinking will let you ignore it. After all, you will say, it's bringing in the numbers, but at what expense? Because if you are not careful, and in many places we have people like that, professionals like that, leaders like that, they begin to, reduce and compromise the psychological safety within the organization, and attrition spikes. Then before you say, Jack, one of these days, even the bully may decide to move on himself or relocate abroad, and it will have destroyed the system, and the system will have been so dependent on him or her, and you now wonder, what did we gain? How much money was retaining him or her worth? And was it worth what we lost from a systemic perspective? So you want to enforce your organizational values consistently. You want to link conduct to promotion, to performance, and to rewards, as the case may be. Why does this matter? Okay, strategic blind spots. Okay, if you're on autopilot, you will have what we call strategic blind spots. You'll be clinging to outdated practices. Your organization, or even you as a professional, will lose competitive edge. Again, you begin to experience what we call operational inertia. Okay, no feedback loops. All right, HR becomes reactive, not proactive. So for you to be proactive as an HR practitioner, you have to think. So all right, you also may have what we call tolerating bias. Okay, always done it this way, those kind of things, and it erodes trust in HR's credibility. And autopilot hinges a lot on what this is the way we have done it. It provides some form of comfort, which is not sustainable. All right. So some actions for HR leaders. Let's model critical thinking. What problems are we solving in every meeting? Let's ask questions. Let's why. Okay, you said we should fill this vacancy. Why are we filling the vacancy? Why can we not share the work among the existing staff? Or why can't we outsource this role? I'm just saying, why can't we get a freelance employee, a contingent worker to do it? Ask why. Ask why. So even if the person comes from the onset and says, let us outsource the role, you will still say, why are we not insourcing it? Why is this not? Do you understand? So it's not about which direction the person is going. It's about applying critical thinking, asking the right question. Let's begin to even more reward curiosity, incentivize HR teams to challenge assumptions. We say it sometimes, we say, oh, permit me to play the devil's advocate. Can I say this? That consistently, on every matter, we must assign, delegate, get somebody to play the devil's advocate on every matter. So this is not something that somebody will play occasionally. Of course, you can be rotating who is playing it. Why are we saying this? So that we don't all sleep and face the same direction. We will ask questions. We will challenge. Why are we going through with this idea? Even when you make your final decision, which you will make, by the time you get any counter from any other stakeholders, because internally you have asked yourself questions, you will have reasonable, robust answers, and you'll have strengthened your position because you are not defensive, you are open-minded, you are growth-minded, you don't have a fixed mindset, you are open-minded. Questions help us expand our horizon, help us to expand our options, our alternatives. Okay? Let me say this on a lighter note. I remember way back, I went to visit somebody and they asked me, they said, would you like to eat? Please pay attention to this question. Would you like to eat? I said, no, thank you. That same day, I went to visit another family, and then they said, what would you like to eat? Guess what? Where they asked, what would you like to eat? I ate there. Where they asked, would you like to eat? I said no. It almost looks like one question was, you will eat or not eat. The other one was, what would you like to eat? So the way we ask questions will determine how the team members will respond. There are ways you will ask questions, everybody will just say, it is okay. And there are ways you will ask questions, so great idea, but what have we considered? And then are able to get a wider scope of options. We must demand for data. This is not a cliche, please. In God we trust, all others must bring what? Data. All right. So we require metrics-backed justification for all major HR. You see the time of HR as investment, initiatives of HR as investment. Even if it is thank God it's Friday, it's an investment. If we are doing team bonding, it's an investment. And we need data. All right. We need what? We really, really need data. We really, really need data. Now, part 2, which is the final part, I'll be slightly fast here. I've been intentional with the HR examples and illustrations. So we'll just focus more on critical thinking very swiftly. All right. So critical thinking is important. It helps us to improve decision making, enhance problem abilities, us to refine our research skills. It helps us polish our creativity and stimulate curiosity. Let me say this about our research skills. Irrespective of what you study, whether you went to a university or polytechnic, we all did projects, something like a project. Now, there are 2 or 3 categories of people on this call. People that their projects, they did themselves. People that their projects, they housed it completely. And they with an outsourced. In other words, they and you are doing it together like collaborative. Which category are you? Feel free to drop in the chat box. But where am I going? Just see that project that once you're in final year, they will call something project. In some schools, the project may be individual. In some schools or in some departments, they may pair 2, 3, 4 people together. But why are we doing that project? Is to refine our skills. Because in real life, yes, you may not end up becoming a academic or industrial researcher, but we need to research, and we all research. Today when you tell somebody, Google it, that is also a simple part of research, even though that is more about finding out information, okay, and not just rigorous research. So some of components of what critical thinking requires analyzing information, but you need to even source and obtain and get the information. All right, you need to be able to evaluate arguments. All right. And they made it very respectful, especially to our ladies. Sometimes, unconsciously, we like using this word, I feel. Men and women, ladies and gentlemen, please, especially at the workplace, avoid using that phrase feel. Even if you feel, don't use that word feel. Because there are some people, once they hear the word I feel, I prefer I think to I feel. I think means I have weighed the options. I have gathered the data. I have synthesized the information. I feel means intuition, hunch. Let your feeling or hunch or intuition lead you to thinking, and then propose it as I think after looking at options, all right? And thinking leads to what? Problem solving. Very, very important. Very, very important. Again, some of the core components of critical thinking requires what? Fallacy recognition. What's a fallacy? A fallacy may look like a positive sounding statement. It may sound very good to the ear. In fact, it might have been repeated many times by many people, but it may be false, or it may be false in your own context. So that something is valid in 10 contexts doesn't be. We are still talking about critical thinking, and all these internet outages are reasons to even think more. All right. So, fallacy recognition, inference, evaluation analysis, and so on and so forth. Key elements of critical thinking. Please pay attention. Pay attention. We are almost rounding up this session and we'll take question, answers, and contribution. Now, there's what we call intellectual integrity. What do we mean? That when you're in a meeting and they say, what do you think? One, you think. Two, based on what you think, you express yourself. I've moved around a bit and I've seen this play out a lot. The average individual, when they are expected to make a comment or contribution in a meeting, and if you have experienced this, you can say so in the chat box. What they do is they will, 2 or 3 categories. Category 1, what would the MD like to hear? And they will say what they think the MD would like to hear. Or some say, what is the MD thinking? They will now try to mimic what the MD is thinking and try to regurgitate it. Or in some instances, once a senior person or a specific person has said something, you just be hearing, like the chairman said, like the chairman said, like the chairman said. I'm not saying what the chairman said is not valid, but don't let what the chairman said anchor your thinking or prevent you from expressing your own thoughts. Again, please, when we say critical thinking, we don't mean that you must insult other people. We don't mean that you must be condescending towards other people who have contributed. You just say, oh, thank you for the brilliant contributions and submission. Have we thought about this perspective? You have to be bold. You have to be assertive. You have to be courageous. Yes, you can share your opinion. When I say opinion here, opinion not based on God, based on thinking. And they may not take it. They may ignore it. That doesn't mean that the next time they ask for your opinion, you don't think and you don't share it. Because, please, I know a few of us are working in places right now, we almost no longer think. We're just on autopilot. We just say, what do you want? And we give it to them. Please, for your sake, don't lose your thinking capability. It's only animals that just respond strictly to stimulus. Yes, when we get feedback, we think and pause before we respond. So intellectual integrity is key. To be able to say, you have all said this, I don't agree. This is why I don't agree. However, if this is the majority decision, I will support the outcome. So logical reasoning is very key. Evidence-based analysis is key. So one of the things that will happen to us going forward increasingly is when we are trying to make a submission, you just don't make the submission. You say, because of this fact, and this fact, I think we should. You have anchored your suggestion on data, on facts. Don't anchor it based on you or your feeling. If, for example, for any additional information, data, or facts is provided or context, feel free to say, okay, I would like to overrule my initial submission based on additional context. You must be able to change your mind. And that's part of what? Open-mindedness. I saw this incidentally just today, and I shared it on the WhatsApp group. I saw it on another group, and I liked it. 24 questions to sharpen your critical thinking. And these questions more or less expands the 5 whys, okay? And let's look at who, for example, who benefits from this? Who is affected if this goes wrong? Who is missing from this conversation? Look at that. Who is missing from this conversation? Who has solved a similar problem before? Just who. Look at the 4 dimensions. And when I read it, I'm like, wow, this is robust. Just who. Because if a critical stakeholder is missing from the conversation, can you really and truly come to a good and robust conclusion? I doubt it. Yes, you will have a conclusion, but at best it will be what? Suboptimal. Let's look at the what. What am I, or what are we trying to solve? What are the facts? And what are the what? Opinions. What am I assuming without proof? Now, look at this 3rd question. It takes humility to ask this question. And part of critical thinking is what? Humility. Your ego stands in the way of critical thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, I have 24 years of HR experience. That's why it doesn't matter who is doing the webinar on this platform, whether you have 5 years, I listen with the heart of a student. I don't come with, oh, I have a PhD, oh, I've served in CIPM Council, and so what? And there's nobody who has shared insights on this platform that I didn't learn. In fact, it now adds to my rapporteur of wisdom and knowledge. Look at question 3 again. On what? What am I assuming without proof? And this happens to even me. Okay? What information is missing? What information is missing? Now, let's go to the where. Okay? Where is this coming from? Where will this decision lead? Where could this create problems? Where can I find more clarity? Very good questions. You see, once you improve the quality of your questions, what happens to your quality of thinking? You experience a quantum leap. Let's look at the why. The why. Why does this matter? Why do I believe this is true? Why might others see this differently? Why haven't we solved this already? Why is the problem persisting? You know, that reminds me of something in the advert. You say, if symptoms persist after 2 days, who can complete that? If symptoms persist after 2 days, and the question is, why haven't we solved this already? Sometimes, if you ask that question and you know why, it may give you 1 or 2 insights. Of course, if symptoms persist after 2 days, thank you so much. Consult your what? Doctor. The last question, how? How will I measure success? You can see we have gone back to data. Because if we cannot determine upfront, ab initio, how we are going to measure success, perhaps we are not even trying to address the right problems. How could this go wrong? Again, this is not negative thinking, because sometimes people are afraid to say, God forbid, once you are in and I've seen it before, in a work environment, you ask something like, what if this thing doesn't work? They will just shut you down, just say, stop being negative-minded, please. This is critical thinking. In critical thinking, you have what we call scenario planning. What if it rains tomorrow morning? Please don't say, God forbid, it won't rain. That rain will be helpful to the farmers. There are certain people in this ecosystem that requires this rain. Do you understand? So what if it rains? Do I take Uber? What if it rains? Do I use my umbrella? What if it rains? Do I wake up earlier? Do you understand what I mean? Don't say, God forbid. That is not critical thinking. How can I test this before committing? Look at this 3rd question. You don't want to spend all the money. how can I test this before committing? In other words, how can we do a pilot? How can we do it at a miniature level? Do you understand? It's almost like you want to go into a new profession and then you go and do like a 1 week internship or attachment. Then you will really know whether you like the place or not. How will I explain this choice to others? How? 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 Thank you so much, Madam Princess. She says there, cannot be measured, cannot be managed. Absolute. Very valid yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Princess also said, proof of concept. You don't want to commit in this economy, you don't want to invest naira to realize that it didn't work. Maybe you can still play with 50,000 naira, maybe 5,000 naira to a pilot. So this is called the 5 words whys. You know, that's the name of the questioning. But you can see that in this particular example, you have 5 whys and you also have a how, and each of the whys also have like four questions, which is very, very robust. So even if you limit it to this and you go through this framework and you respond to all the questions critically, when I say you, it may mean your team, okay, your group, your HR department, and so on and so forth, that you will have taught holistically. And very, very important. So critical thinking components identify biases and assumptions. That's what we call confirmation bias. In other words, favoring information that supports pre-existing beliefs. Ignoring negative feedback on a preferred strategy. Okay. We also have what we call anchoring bias. In other words, relying too heavily on the first piece of information received. The first piece. And we say this in Nigeria, at least all the parts I've visited, no be first to go to police, they win case. What that means is that it is not the first information that the police receives that will determine the eventual outcome of a case. What we are trying to say is that anchoring bias does not determine the outcome of a legal case. All right. Again, you probably have estimated project timelines based on an initial guess rather than data. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we begin to coast home and attempt to wrap up, okay, I'd like you to respond in the chat box very quickly. Stay with me, ladies and gentlemen. The next few slides will be interactive, and I'll need your responses in the chat box. And quickly, what comes to mind, quickly say it, all right? And just write true or false. If everyone on your team agrees instantly on a solution, it is definitely the right choice. True or false? Quickly, ladies and gentlemen, stay with me. Okay. I've seen like 5 responses, and I've seen at least one thing I'm happy is that I've also seen the 2 answers, which gives me some comfort to show we're all humans. The answer is what? Why? Group think kills what? Critical thinking. Healthy teams debate alternatives. Now, it doesn't mean that if everybody agrees that there's a problem, but we are saying that maybe you are the leader of a committee or of a project, and you come up with something, or any of the team members come up with something, and everybody instantly agrees. It doesn't make it the right choice. Okay, it doesn't make it the right choice. Thank you, everyone, for your response, including somebody that introduced another response called not really. I love that. That's part of what? Creativity. All right. How do you evaluate evidence and logic? So we must be able to differentiate between what? Fact and opinion. Fact and opinion. You need to distinguish verifiable data from what? Personal judgment. So there are instances when people call me, and people call me a lot, and I try to take as many calls as possible. Sometimes I try to defer the call and say, let's talk at a more convenient time. And sometimes when people are talking to me and asking for my opinion, note opinion, I realize that they are not giving me enough information. And yet they want me to make a categorical judgment. And I say, hey, I have a feeling that what you have told me is not everything about this case. Can we talk in the evening? Or when I have more time to, so to speak, cross-examine you. And when I ask and ask and ask, even my opinion will change. Why? They have given me facts, data. So we need to be able to separate what? Facts from opinion. And when you are given an opinion, be professional to say, I'm not speaking based on facts right now. Based on the limited information, my opinion is. But if you give me more information, I'll be able to be factual. Okay? Logical fallacies, recognize flawed reasonings, things like we have always done it this way. You know, especially when you join a new organization, it doesn't matter your age or experience. You hear something like, didn't you meet us here? They are trying to what? Anchor you. You see? And let's say it the way it is. There's comfort in we have always done it this way, because it may mean it has been working and it has worked many times. It brings stability, it brings efficiency, it helps reduce our risk. Okay, it also helps preserve knowledge. This, we have always done it this way. But some of the challenges with it will include stagnation, okay, obsolescence, okay, missed opportunities, resistance to change, lack of flexibility, and what? Limited learning. Because if you don't experiment, if you don't try other methods, we won't know what else can work. We don't even know how, to what extent they will work. All right. So because the software failed the last time, it doesn't mean it will always fail. That's what we call hasty generalization. We need to be careful. All right. Critical thinking will examine if conditions have changed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining and thank you for waiting so far. Thank you, Madam Princess. I'm feeling your contribution. She says here again, the popular saying is, don't fix it when it is not broken. It is a popular saying, like you have said, ma'am. But we are saying that does not support critical thinking. We will keep thinking each time we want to go through the process. Why? You know, there is a book called Who Moved My Cheese? The cheese might have been moved. A variable, a parameter, one of the items, one of the components might have been modified and may mean that solution may not be sufficiently robust to solve it. Thank you so much, ma'am, for dropping that. Okay, we must always think. We must continue to think. Let's look at this. All right. True or false? True or false? Again, you write or type true or false in the chat box. Saying I don't know is a sign of poor critical thinking. I'll give us, say, 15 seconds. Okay? Saying I don't know. In other words, somebody asks you a question or asks for your opinion and you respond, I don't know. Is it a sign of poor critical thinking? True or false? Yes, it's a very good book, man. A very, very good book. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy that I am getting two types of responses. So far, I've seen many people say false, and I've seen many people say true. All right. It means I'm in the right class. And it also means it shows the value of having this kind of conversation on critical thinking. All right. And I see people trying to stay on the fence. Eniola is saying not exactly. If you go and do JAMB again, you won't see not exactly as one of your options, any. Okay. No wala. All right. Thank you so much. So let's look at the answer. The answer is false. Okay. Again, admitting ignorance is a step to learning. You see, if you don't know and you say you don't know, it's better than you don't, like you can't think, you now say, but when you now say you don't know, but I can go and what? Find out, or I will do research, or I will touch base with my colleagues, or I will speak to a senior colleague, or I will go and get the data. You see, so many times, especially senior people, we expect them to always have the answer. And when you think, by quickly thinking, you may realize that you don't know. And quickly say, I don't know. Give me some time. 30 minutes, 1 hour. Please don't I don't know and then remain on the I don't know premise. So say I don't know and then ask for maybe 30 minutes, 2 days, depending on the context and the urgency around whatever the request is. But if you don't know, and people have asked me questions and I've said I don't know. Sometimes people have asked me questions and say, sometimes they will put you on the spot and say, please, what does the labor law say on this? I say, can you give me 30 minutes? I'll get back to you. Let me check. Or hold on. Let me check now. Let me check. Do you understand? There is no shame in it. Oh, there is no shame in it. Humility is part of what? Critical thinking. We need to be able to consider multiple what? Perspectives. Stakeholder analysis. Who is affected by this decision? We need to be able to play what? The devil's advocate. There's a popular church, I won't mention the name, that we know. That church actually has an office, a church, and an office in that church is the office of the devil's advocate. And that devil's advocate attends every meeting. Just to also put this in context, they want a situation where somebody takes the contrary view to the popular view or the contrary view to the scriptural view. Why? When they go to the world, in quotes, there is no feedback you will provide. They will not be hearing it for the first time. Their designated devil's advocate will have brought it up, and they will know how to counter it, how to respond to it, how to mitigate it, and so on and so forth. So deliberately arguing against a proposal to test its strength deepens it. Let's quickly look at another true or false. Ladies and gentlemen, let's quickly look at another true or false. Critical thinking means over-analyzing every decision until it is too late. I have a feeling everybody will get this one right. And we'll probably all have one response. Okay, my brother Isaiah Popola says, to me, if you say you don't know, it may also mean one does not want to engage his or her critical thinking sometimes. Yes, you don't know, but quickly commit to a time that would give me 5 minutes to investigate. Give me 30 minutes to double check. But, if you are a doctor, for example, and patients ask you something and you don't know and you say you know, my brother, you will keep person. You will keep person. So if you don't know, just own it up. Right. I expected everybody will say the same thing for me, and it's understandable. The answer, of course, is false or correct. It is about, so it's not analysis paralysis, it is effective analysis. Okay, it is not analysis paralysis, it is what? Effective analysis. In fact, I've worked with 1 or 2 bosses when they don't want to approve your proposal. Instead of saying no, they will keep asking for analysis until you are overwhelmed and you give up. That kind of a thing. All right. So applying critical thinking to problem solving, define the problem clearly. Okay. Avoid vague statements. Gather relevant information. What data do we need? Analyze and question assumptions. Are we missing something? Generate and evaluate solutions. What are the pros? What are the cons? And the alternatives. Sometimes we focus only on the pros and cons and ignore what? The alternatives. Make a decision and reflect. Did we consider all angles? Make a decision and reflect. Did we consider all angles? All right. Look at this again. True or false? The more confident somebody sounds, the more likely they are right. True or false? The more confident someone sounds, the more likely they are right. True or false? I like the same tonight's class. I try to make it as engaging and as interactive as possible. And some of these questions, I'm asking it deliberately because especially we leaders on this call, because some of our subordinates or some of our colleagues, they come with so much confidence and they'll be telling you something authoritatively. Some people can lie authoritatively. Some people can bobo authoritatively. Some people can tell you something they didn't research authoritatively. Don't equate confidence to mean the data is valid. Please ask for your evidence, please. Confidence does not equate what? Competence. I will say it again. Confidence does not equate competence. I've even seen some competent people that are not even very confident, even though, generally speaking, all things being equal, when you are competent, your level of confidence will what? Will increase. Ladies and gentlemen, okay, let's look at overcoming some barriers to critical thinking. Okay, common challenges and solutions in real life. In quote, somebody will say, Oluyemi, you don't know what I'm facing. My line manager just called me and is asking for me to make a decision. How do I, apply the 5 whys? And I'm standing in front of him, or the or the head of department. So we know that there's time pressure. Okay, sometimes you can quickly ask in your mind 5 whys. You don't have to be as detailed as the 5 whys I showed you. Okay, some other challenges, emotional reactions. Pause and assess before responding. Calm down. Mommy, calm down. Daddy, calm down. Big bros, calm down. Again, group think. Don't be afraid of dissent. Don't be afraid of being an outlier. All right? Don't be afraid of dissent or being an outlier. True or false? Okay, true or false? Asking why 5 times will always reveal the root cause of a problem. I suspect we'll all get this question. True or false? Asking why 5 times will always get to the root of a problem. Okay. Okay. All right. Coming in. Okay. True, mostly. The 5 techniques works. All right. All right. So, and when we say 5 why, don't forget that we have said 5 whys does not mean it must be 5. It can be 3, it can be 20, it can be 7. It just means keep asking why until you have gotten to the bottom, to the root cause of the situation. So again, structure, we need to communicate with clarity and confidence, structure thoughts effectively. Okay, start with the conclusion, provide supporting arguments. That's what we call the pyramid principle. We need to practice active listening. They say this a lot, and I love it, that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You see, part of critical thinking is critical listening. I'll say that again. Part of critical thinking is what? Critical listening. When you listen to everybody, okay, it helps with clarity, all right? It helps with clarity. It helps with clarity. And sometimes how we say things matter. Instead of saying this won't work, say I have concerns about X because of Y. Can we explore Z as an alternative? Don't just say rubbish. Don't just be condescending. Don't just, I've been in meetings where I was, okay, very good idea. Let's pack it. Then we write it down. And between me and you, some of us thought that was a very dumb idea. But when you think it's a dumb idea and you say it, or you let your gestures show it, what are you doing? You will kill people's capacity to think and express their minds. True or false again, ladies and gentlemen? True or false, all right? All opinions are equally valid in critical thinking. Let me see. You see that I'm intentionally asking questions that force us to think critically. This one, let me see where most of us will fall. All opinions are valid equally in critical thinking. Let me see. The responses are coming in. All responses are equally valid in critical thinking. Okay? The answers are coming in fast and furious. Let's see the answer. Ladies and gentlemen, false. False. Ladies and gentlemen, false. Why is it false? Except the opinions that are backed by what? Evidence. Don't forget that opinion is different from fact. Again, I'm using style to check if you are for this conversation. I know some of us joined when we were midway. All right. So an opinion is just an opinion, except the opinion is backed by what? Evidence. Please, let me say this authoritatively here. Let me say it with confidence. Many people that share their opinions is just backed by what? Vibes, not data, not facts, not evidence. So when people share their opinion, yes, we listen to it, then you say, okay, can you provide substantiation for this claim? And even in job interviews, we do it a lot. We say, what have you done? People just be talking about, bro. By the time you're now asking question, you will now see that some of this thing is what? Packaging. So, key takeaway, Critical thinking involves what? Analysis, logic, and open-mindedness. Analysis, logic, and open-mindedness. It helps us avoid biases. It helps to improve decisions and helps to solve problems effectively. It also helps us to apply what? Structured frameworks in daily tasks and communication. Ladies and gentlemen, practice critical thinking. Question one assumption in meetings. For those of us going to work tomorrow, question. Let people say, what happened today? You're asking more questions. And let people begin to say that of you. That is like suddenly you're asking more questions. You are not taking anything at face value anymore. It doesn't matter the hierarchy. You're okay. Again, if you are the leader in a team and you ask your opinion and you see everybody group thinking, encourage creative tension, encourage creative debate. Tell them, oh yeah, justify why you agree. You know, reflect on past decisions. What could you have done what very, very differently? So let me just, so for our contribution and comments or questions, as the case may be, let me just use this final example that is not really work. So if you have, say, a child that is, say, 6 or 7 years old or primary school age, how would you determine or decide which school they will go to? For example, how would you determine? And if you want to respond to this question, please raise your hands and we'll allow you on mute. How would you, and we want you to use critical thinking to respond to this. It doesn't matter whether you are single or married, at least you know children. You are once a child, you have children around you. If you have a child, maybe 5, 6, 7, they are of child school-going age, how would you determine the kind of factors, what parameters? Anyone, if I can get 1 or 2 people, okay, I want something light because I also want us to, in quotes, be applying this critical thinking in our personal lives. Let me see. This one I prefer we talk, if it don't matter. All right. Let me see. I'm checking. Don't raise your real hand though, because I won't see it though. You need to raise your virtual hand. I think I saw Vicky Star's hand now. If you like to respond, at least people must be able to respond. Or maybe you tell us how your own parents decided the school you will attend for primary school. Maybe it is because it's the closest to your house. Okay, Vicky Star, you have the floor, my sister.
Good evening, Dr. Sir. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I was part of this. Thank you, sir. Well, for myself, basically what I do is I engage some parents, or find yourself going not to just jump into any offer. You engage a lot of parents and get to find out how their kids are coping. With that, you can draw a conclusion. I'm just saying this based on experience, both personally and as a parent. So for me, it's just doing a market survey of different schools, not basically the one closest to you. The one that might be closer to you may not be the best for your child. So it also has to do with you engaging parents and getting to find out how we're able to get their kids and how the kids were able to cope with schools. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'll read Eniola's comment and we'll take Princess' contribution now. Eniola says, I'll do my research first based off on my location, the curriculum used, the environment, the hygiene, the size of class, the number of pupils, the teacher's diction, phone, then the teacher's appearance, and more. Madam Princess, you have the floor. Thank you, Eniola. I like that.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening,
sir. Mayoga. Well done, sir. So I'll quickly share my experience. If for those who are close to me, I relocated from the UK in 2008 back to Nigeria. and I needed my son to come for secondary school. I've always wanted my son to come for secondary school in Nigeria. So this was some of the things that I did. I gathered the entire data of the different schools that have international flavor. So for you to decide, for me to decide, I wanted a school where there will be a mix of being very, international in their outlook and yet very local, if you know what I mean. So they needed to be, I wanted to have the local and global flavor. So a school where they'll be very Oyibo and all of that, but they would also be very Nigerian, because my whole idea of bringing my son back to Nigeria for secondary school is for him to be grounded in the Nigerian culture. So I first of all needed to look at all of this, because I was being given, American International School, British International School, this, that, and all of that. But I didn't want any of those ones. So I really needed to get data, like, the critical thinking, get the data, get people that have gone to different schools to give me their opinion, went on the internet to look, went on the school database from the British High Commission, because they have schools of expatriates that are coming and they put their children in those schools. I got all of those things. But one of the things, apart from the fact that I wanted my son to have that Nigerian grounding culture embedded in him, I was also looking at my son's academic, the way he was academically. What was he good at? So what schools can offer and encourage him will have that platform. He is very sporty. He played football, very active in football. So I needed to. So there's quite a lot of spectrum. There's quite a lot of spectrum that one would have to, and that is what we mean by critical thinking. One size does not fit all. What worked for me will not work for you. What worked for everyone will look at their individual circumstances, their individual situation. Money is also part of it. How much is the school fees? Is it sustainable for me? Can I afford it on the long run? Do you understand? Okay, where is the school located? Yes, that's also all of those things. So there's a whole spectrum that one has to really review and really critically, analyze them, think deeply, go through all your whys, the different W's and the how, how you're going to get there, how is the son going to, how is he going to fit in? And I'll tell you one thing, so that my son will not have a culture shock. I have also, every December, I will bring him home for Christmas. Every December, because I knew that I wanted him to come back. After all, I was born in the UK. My parents brought us back. We turned out right. And we have that cultural, standing. And that's what I wanted to pass on. So the parental, what you want for your child will also come to play. Some people don't even want their children to identify with Nigeria anymore. While some people will say, I want my son or my child or my children to have that cultural background of Nigeria. You understand? So these are all of the different spectrums that I had to go through when I was bringing my son. People gave me a lot of bashing. Some people say, at that time I wasn't even in Nigeria. I was still in the UK because it was 2007. I hadn't gotten a job to come back, but I had already said, whether I'm here or not, I was going to take him to Nigeria. He was going to be in boarding school, but I know that there's also the network of the support network. If I'm not here to be on his visiting days, who will be here? Who are the people that are around us that will make sure that he's comfortable if I'm not able to, at the touch of a button, come over, because I was still in the UK. So it's a whole lot of things. And the fact that I am relocating does not mean that people in Nigeria, too, even if you're in Nigeria, even if you're in Lagos, your location, the nearest school to you might not be the best school, the farthest school to you might not be the best school, the rich and the very big school might not be the best school, because sometimes your child can suffer this, what they call the star child syndrome. Where he's coming from, he might be the best child. By the time he gets into another school where they have a lot of best children in that school, that child might begin to lose their confidence and think that they're not good. Just because when they do exam, 10 people will come first and he will then come 10th. So this is so many things that you have to look at. And of course, the God factor is always there. You pray about it. Thank you very much, sir.
Madam, Thank you so much. God bless you. I use that example for us to see how robust. Now, some of us, we have children in school. We probably also taught this wide, but we were not completely intentional. It's almost like subconscious thinking. Let me say one more thing around this question, and we'll wrap up this question on this. Do you realize that the average parent, once their firstborn goes to a school, if they have 3 children, the second and the third one we have to go to the same school the first born boy or girl went. Guess what is happening? They did critical thinking when they want to send the first child to school. They will now not do critical thinking for the second and third. Why? The context of the second and the third. So if the first was not athletic, so going to a school that does a lot of sports was not a key parameter. By the time you have your second child, but this one is not athletic, but you now anchor on, I just want to be able to carry them to the same school and back, commuting. Meanwhile, if you have 4 children, you should analyze for each of those child separately, because the context of each child. So you may be privileged that all the 4 will go to one school. You may be sure they may need to go to 4 different schools to optimize their personality, their their capacity and their school. Some people will say, no, I need a school that is bilingual, French and English. Some people say, I need a school that has a strong faith inclination, and so on and so forth. Again, we are not saying one method is right or wrong, but we are saying everything we do, we should avoid groupthink. Think for the first child, think for the second, think for the third, so some may go to the same school, no problem. But don't let it be because that's the convenient thing to do. Not that you are thinking about the future of specific child. Ladies and gentlemen, at this intersection, I would like to entertain any question or comments or contributions. We'd like to take just a few and we wrap up tonight's class. Personally, I've enjoyed this session. I've enjoyed the level of engagement and communication. Anyone, if you raise your hands, we'll unmute you. You share your thoughts, maybe your reflection or maybe what you have learned or one key takeaway. Doesn't have to be a question, it can be a comment or contribution. I'm enjoying all this feedback. And you come, somebody said 5 of us went to the same school. I think that if you check it well, would the same school pay the 5 of you? Apart from the convenience, so that at least, all right, only 3 of us went to the same school and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. Okay. Any comments, any questions, any contributions? So in the absence of that, I'll just enable all of us to unmute and then we wrap up. So enjoy this tonight. Thank you for your master.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. You're doing well.
Thank you, Doctor, for another initiative.
Thank you very much.
That was
Thank you, sir. It was
Thank
very,
you,
very
sir,
enlightening.
for
And
this
when I saw
wonderful session.
critical thinking, I knew that you are going to a philosophy class.
thank you,
Question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Logic.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yes, philosophy and logic.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so
And we
much.
got what people pay for on a platter of gold. Really very grateful, Dr. Emi.
I
Thank
tell
so
you,
much.
like free FOC as
Yes.
always.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you,
so
sir.
we
People
are
on the
lucky to have
HR
Doctor
resources,
in
they
our
don't
midst.
know
In
what
fact,
they
I
don't know what
always
they are
appreciate it.
getting. They don't
Honestly,
know.
Yeah,
honestly.
welcome.
I'll still share my
This is
testimony on that platform, but
this is what
we
you
keep
pay
going.
every
Ah,
for
we
in
share
MBA class.
testimony, we share
Yes.
testimony.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Emi and
We thank
everyone.
God. Thank you for your
Thank
support
you,
and
Doctor.
contribution.
Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome.